I'm Genevieve Randall. Welcome to our pre-concert chat for this May 7th performance given by Lincoln Symphony Orchestra. Maybe you're hearing this the night of, maybe you're hearing this ahead of time, 6 p.m. Lead Center, Sunday, if you're hearing this ahead of the concert. I'm Genevieve Randall with Nebraska Public Media, and we're so proud to support Lincoln Symphony Orchestra with these pre-concert chats. Just a note that you can listen for concerts like this one on our occasional series, Nebraska Concerts, which broadcasts on Mondays at 10 p.m. I am joined for our chat by concert master Anton Miller. Hi, Anton, welcome.
Thank you.
Why do we all wave to each other on Zooms? I don't know, but we
I
do.
don't know.
And of course, music director Ed Polachek. Ed, great to see you.
Always great to be here. Always.
So this is a program called International Voices, and we get a nice big feature for you, Anton, our concert master. And to do this, I would like to kind of work backwards, a little quick on Brahms, kind of quick on Manuel Ponce, and then some more chat about the composer on the program, who is probably new to most audience, I would say. And then maybe just a little fun with Ed and Anton if we have time. I will be watching the clock here. So Brahms, Symphony No. 2 will round out this program at the end. And of course, if you're in the audience, you have program notes to read. So let's just talk about how this symphony starts out. Beethoven's Fifth, for example, starts out with force, and this is not.
This is an unusual, of all of the four symphonies that Brahms wrote, it's always been in my book one of the it seemed to portray a very, from what I got from the music, and it's always spoke to me this way, that it portrayed a time in Brahms's life when he seemed to be much more celebratory, positive, in a happy kind of mode that Brahms not always is. He seems to be so often so serious. And oddly, when he wrote to his publisher, he said about this particular symphony, this is probably the most melancholic, saddest piece I've ever written. I can hardly bear it. And when I read that, I thought, really? Oh my gosh, it seems to just go from movement to movement that is just more and more. It's an intense piece, but it just seems to be on the loftier, lighter side of Brahms than it is. I mean, when you think of the way the first one opens with the boom, 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 and then the third one with that gorgeous, I mean, it opens somewhat in the F major, but then it gets into the darker C minor and it ends in F minor. And then the fourth is in this really longing E minor, almost tragic key. But the second just seems to be just, for me, full of life and full of beauty. It's the only one that he wrote that includes the tuba. All the other three, 1, 3, and 4, have contrabassoon. And all of my contrabassoon players have always said, well, he made a mistake on the second symphony, except for the tuba player who said he finally got it right on that. But it is gorgeous. And you spoke of the Beethoven, that ba 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 ba. This actually has 3 fast notes and a slow at the very beginning. It's Brahms was all about the motives, the way Beethoven was, and he kind of carried that into the Romantic era in a beautiful way. But I adore this thing. It's been many years since we've done it. Anton, I don't know how many years it's been since. It's been over a decade.
It has. And and I was going to say, with Brahms, I always feel like, because he was such a perfectionist, and
right,
because he, when he sent stuff to his editor, I think he always made these comments about it's such a difficult work, or it's such a, it just always seems like there's stuff like that, because I think all of the pieces that he wrote just had great meaning for him. So they were all very deep, and I think he put so much time and effort and emotion into them. And obviously that's one of the reasons why Brahms is so great and that we love Brahms so much, is because you can hear that in his music. It's just always present. It's always there.
And to my mind, I have to say, listen for the cellos in the second movement, right?
Always listen to the cello in Brahms because they have that deeper, darker voice that is just. He even he pairs the violas and the cello together a lot in this, but yet he puts the cellos on the top voice above the violas. It's really exquisite writing. And Anton, you brought up how he was so picky about. He had to be so precise. It took him 20 some years to write the first symphony because he was never happy with it. He was always afraid of being compared to Beethoven, and it had to be absolutely perfect. And as a result, he destroyed a lot of his output. He just wouldn't have it published. And when I read that about the letter to his publisher, I thought, I wonder if he was just having fun with his stogie and saying, ha 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 ha. I don't know. But I got the biggest kick out of that. Nonetheless, by the time you get to the end of the fourth movement, I mean, it's off the charts in terms of the way he combines the winds, the brass, the timpani, and the strings. I mean, it just explodes at the very end. It's a fantastic.
And I have to say too, just personally, that piece as an adult. I mean, of course, growing up, I was playing violin and listening to various composers and really liked Brahms a lot and thought it was wonderful. But as an adult playing that piece, it really made me truly love Brahms. And that was the piece that, I mean, for violin, we have, the sonatas, which are just unbelievable. And we have all this great music, but it was that second symphony that really drew me in, as an adult, just to say, okay, now I understand why as a kid I liked it so much, because it just is so deep and it's so wonderful and beautiful.
Well, so after that, let's chat about the middle piece, because ahead of this Brahms, we get a kind of Anton Miller marathon. I'm assuming you're carbo loading before the performance.
Yeah, already. I'm starting right now.
So we get this violin concerto by Manuel Ponce. And, this is one of those pieces that makes me think program notes are sometimes like looking at someone's resume, and then you meet them in the interview and you get to know their personality. What's the personality of this music? How does this make you feel?
Well, so I've played a lot of Ponce, when there are a bunch of chamber music pieces, and he wrote a tremendous amount of stuff. And I'm always fascinated by his writing because it's very accessible just to listeners to hear it. It's very tuneful. He wrote so many tunes, and he wrote a lot for the guitar and a lot of sort of popular kind of things. And so for me, it's really I kind of get a sense of a joy in sort of native songs and music, and then also this just incredible drama that he puts into his music. So I feel like he was truly a child prodigy. What everybody says, and I think when he was it's either when he was very young, he got the measles and he wrote his first piece, the March of the Measles.
I love it.
But he's the first international composer, really recognized international composer from Mexico, and he he wrote Estraíta, which is a piece that sort of just made the rounds around the world, and he was sort of on the main stage at that point. And I think that piece was not published until he was, I don't know, in his 20s or something, but I think he actually might have written it when he was more like 11. So I think his output was really very interesting. I love the fact that he was sort of promoting kind of Mexican tunes, and he went to Europe to study and then learned orchestration from Dukas, right? So that he has a great background in just kind of symphonic sort of orchestrations and things. And then I think he had a real love for melodic instruments like the violin. So his violin writing is just so natural, and it really gives the violin so much to do and so much to work with and so much beauty to play. So I think just I wish I could have met Ponce. He wrote the concerto in 1943, I think, and then died 5 years later. But I think he must have been a fascinating person, because I think he did so many things. He was a pianist. He was a composer, obviously. He was a teacher. I mean, it just seemed like he was involved in all sorts of things, and must have been, I think, a really interesting, well-traveled person.
I want to
I-
make sure we have time for our Ukrainian composer and maybe just a little bit of fun. But I want to point out, you mentioned Esther Lita. I went back to listen to this. He winks at Esther Lita in the middle movement.
In the second movement, and you know, the first
And it's
time
more than just one wink.
Yeah.
I was just hoping that, oh, can we all sing along now? You know? But he makes reference to it, kind of glides over it, and carries us onto a different world. I love it. It's just it's incredible stuff. Well, one of the things, Joe, I wanted to say about the Ponce, because I love the way he writes orchestrally, and the give and take, the kind of dialogue between the violin and the orchestra is very much the way Brahms, in his concerti, it's like super huge chamber music, where the orchestra is not just an underpinning or an accompaniment. It is really a dialogue between the two, as it's kind of like a symphony with this tremendous solo, violin solo over it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, the orchestra gets a lot to play. It's fantastic. Fantastic music.
All right. So the first thing on this concert, though, the very first thing, is music by a current composer, the Ukrainian composer Yevhen Stankovich. And I learned earlier, like many Ukrainian composers, some of his music has been banned occasionally. He's struggled to get some of his music performed. Not uncommon, as I said, for Ukrainian composers. He's written some music solely for folk instruments, I learned, and then arranged those later for symphony orchestra. Versatile guy. What is the story behind this particular piece that you're playing, and how the two of you discovered it to put on this program?
Well, we were looking for things, you know, we're always searching for interesting things to put on the season. And you know, we come up with lots and lots of various things. And this one, it's just when I was doing my research on it, it just spoke to me in terms of just the sheer beauty of the piece. And it sort of seemed to me like it was kind of a new version of some things that you would maybe even hear, like we think about Schindler's List and that kind of thing, and it has that kind of passion to it. It has that kind of, and it has a structure that, you know, it begins with beautiful, beautiful tunes, and then it goes into stuff that's really struggling, and it sort of seems like, you know, it's kind of like a little bit how it seems like we are in current day, where, you know, there's beauty in life, and then there's the struggle, and then in the end, everything kind of like sort of works out. In the end, it has a friendly ending, and I think it's also interesting that he's a composer that sort of, this is a little bit of a throwback. I believe he wrote it in 1997, or it was anyway the late 90s, and he wrote it for his son, and he was not writing that kind of music so much, but his son was a violinist who was studying in Canada, and I think Stankovich may have even been in Canada when he wrote it. I'm not sure, but I think you know, it's one of those pieces that it seems like it's sort of like almost a love letter to his son. Like it seems like it feels like that feel to it. So, but you know, and his music really, like it is interesting that he, during the Soviet era, that he was banned. He's been teaching at the university there, I think in Kiev, and he also was director of, you know, or a consortium of composers that were not looked on very friendly wise from the Kremlin. So it's an interesting history, a very interesting history, and I think just the piece itself, to me, really lends it's the kind of music that lends itself for Ed and me to do. It's just it does seem to me like it's kind of this wonderful world of just beauty and sound.
The Kremlin, you know, has, I mean, ostracized so many composers over the years, whether they're Prokofiev, Shostakovich. I mean, it goes way back, ever since the beginning of the Soviet Republic. But one of the things that kind of fascinated me about this piece also was I wondered if Stankovich actually had a poem in mind that he followed in terms of a story or a setting of some sort. I don't know if that's the case, but the way you described it, Anton, is so apt, because it starts out almost like this impressionistic or Ravel-like, you know, beauty, and you settle back, and then all of a sudden you get pulled out of your chair and you go, what's going on? The war is starting, or the Huns are about to invade, and it gets very well, exciting and almost tragic, and then it releases that and comes back into the melancholic or the reminiscence of what was so beautiful in the beginning.
Well, and then you think about, I mean, in my mind, it's sort of clearly, in a way, a commentary. The piece itself is a commentary on kind of the newness of Ukraine being independent. So, if it was late 90s and they, didn't get their independence until just several years before that, and the kind of like, when you have sort of a society that is then sort of looking for the future and newly on its own after having been dominated, it's, I think there are always questions about, like, what is the future going to hold? And I sort of feel like that piece kind of shows that there's this, sort of like, in the beginning, maybe the beauty of the country, and then the middle, or the, kind of the stormy years, and then the end is sort of like hopeful for the future. I also think, just sort of tying it back to Ponce, one of the things that I love about this program and those two pieces together is that both Ponce and Stankovic wrote with, kind of the use folk tunes of their countries. So it's kind of like, the whole wonderful thing about Dvorak and using folk tunes, and Bartok, and all the composers that sort of, there's a tradition of that, and these two composers are really strongly involved in that.
This is a good place to remind listeners that Anton, Ed, you and other musicians that we hear, there is this preparation for pieces like this that's not only physical, because there is a lot for you to do in this piece physically, but there's a mental preparation as well, really. You're taking the audience on a journey through this piece, and it really is an emotional piece.
Right. It's beautiful. There's, very often, I've been kind of fascinated by the way 20th century music, the twists and turns in the journey that it took throughout the decades of the 20th century, from the very beginning with, the kind of the new Viennese school, and some of that music. Well, the craziness of Schoenberg, first of all, introducing serial music, but then going into, a whole plethora of musical show tunes, operetta, the way jazz and big band and Motown and Beatles and blah blah blah, and then you get composers like Copland and Bernstein that are doing some of that Americana stuff, but then you have these others that are just so, Dalla Piccolo and Del Tredici and Willie Schumann and all the Stockhausen and all this craziness, Weissgall, and you don't see much of that programmed anymore. And it's kind of in the later part of the 20th century taken a different turn back toward kind of incorporating all of that stuff together with present day, and so it's the millennium, the 21st century. It's a it's really a new century, and I find it fascinating. I mean, just by virtue of what we're programming anymore, it's so fantastic.
I think we're going in the right direction, is what I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with both of you. I mean, classical music is this living tradition, and to keep it alive, we have to keep continuing to grow and change, and hear music like this that gives us perspective on things. Just to note that there's a part to listen to about a minute before the end for listeners, where there's this little kind of staccato figure underneath. Anton, you're just lyrical right before the end, and I just couldn't believe I hadn't heard this piece before. I had to look it up, and so audience is going to love this. Okay, so before we run out of time here, we've got like a minute left. Our audience knows, of course, these are human beings they're seeing on stage here, but who are these people, these musicians that we see? So let's just have a little tiny bit of fun before I let you go, to send people off with, what is the piece of music on loop forever in your soundtrack to hell?
Gilligan's Island.
No, Gilligan's
Island. In fact, now that I've said it, now you've ruined the rest of my day, because now it's there and I'm in hell right now.
It's going to be stuck in your ears all. Ed, what about you?
I was going to say, first of all, Gilligan's Island was written by Johnny Williams, who
I
is
know.
now John Williams. Believe it or not, the Star Wars, Superman, Schindler's List guy wrote Gilligan's Island. Believe it or not, that's a difficult one in a way, but I guess the one that would drive me in my loop to hell would be the theme from Jeopardy.
That has the added layer of like test anxiety.
I know. It's right. That's right.
Oh, I love it. Well, no test anxiety and no loop to hell on any of this music. Absolute program of beauty. 6 p.m. at the Lead Center if you're catching this pre-concert chat ahead of the concert. If you're at the concert, enjoy this music by Brahms, Ponce, and the Ukrainian composer Yevhen Stankovich. Featuring my guests here during this pre-concert chat, Concertmaster Anton Miller and the maestro Ed Politik, music director for Lincoln Symphony Orchestra. I'm Genevieve Randall. Friends, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.